October 26, 2016, Angela Barlow sent a prophetic message through a text to her best friend Mona. Angie was attending the home of a couple who, unbeknownst to her, were not who they claimed to be. The text contained the address of the couple's apartment on Harcourt Road in Indianapolis, Indiana, in case she were to go missing. This was the last known location Angie was known to be alive. As investigators learned, she sent a Snapchat photo out from the bathroom of the couple's apartment, who they believe lured Angie to the location. Crime Pursuit is seeking justice for Angie. Now, let's join the pursuit. Just in case I go missing, the Angie Barlow story.
Okay, we are back. Welcome to Crime Pursuit Podcast. I'm your host, Ed Bounds, along with Lauren Van Sickle and Jasmine Sparkman. Now, we don't have a new pursuit, but we are here for part 2. And hopefully, we don't have Lauren coughing a whole lot tonight.
I'm back in business.
You sure about that?
I'm 99.2% sure of that.
Okay, great. That's great to hear. Like I said, we are here for part 2, in case I go missing, the Angie Barlow part 2. And we have Mona back with us again tonight, but most importantly, we have Angie's mother.
And her father.
Yeah, and her father. So, well, I would like to, Jasmine, if you can give us a little bit of, with you talking with the parents and the sisters. I think you said you did talk to them.
Yes, I have.
Okay. Can you give us a little bit of, how that went and everything?
It was super phenomenal to get to talk to this family. They are just your average, tight-knit, fun-loving family. Just listening to the sisters talk about the fun things that Angie used to do. One of the things you'll hear us talk about later on as we dig more into that, one of their favorite things to mention was Angie would come in at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay. And she would wake everybody up in the house because she wanted food, according to her mom and her sisters. Okay. And then they had to hop on the couch and have horror movie fest, where they would, sit and binge watch all these horror movies all night. Just a lot of really neat, fun memories for these girls. And it is very evident that Angie is still very much loved and is still very, very much missed by her family. And they are a great family to get to know.
Okay, great. Well, now that we heard that, we want to introduce you. We have Angie's mother, Christina Barlow, right?
It's Christina Barlow Kramer, and then her father is Stephen Kramer.
Okay. And, of course, we got Mona Jackson back, right?
We sure do. If everybody wants to just say hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Okay. So, I want to start with Christina because if there's anybody that know Angie better than anybody, it would be you and her father. Tell our listeners what type of child your daughter was.
She was always a little spitfire. She always had a mind of her own. She was very outgoing and fun-loving, and when she was in elementary school, I mean, she was a really good student. She would just do about anything for anybody, which she was always like that, though. She loved her grandparents. She liked hanging out with them. then when she hit junior high, she did all kinds of sports. She was breaking records, and she did basketball, softball, volleyball, track and field, bowling. And then when she got to high school, she kind of laid off the sports a bit because I think they kind of interfered in her social life. But
Would you describe Angie as a social butterfly?
yeah. When she hit junior high, she definitely became a social butterfly. When she was younger, she was a little bit more reserved, but she was always very independent. I always made jokes with her, telling her she came out of the womb being independent. But she was always a go-getter, though. If she wanted something, she would work for it, and she knew how to earn things. We was never the type of parents that just handed things to, we didn't just hand things to our kids. We always make them earn them. Whether it be a phone or minutes on a phone or, just the simple things that, I grew up with parents and, who were hardworking parents and grandparents who were farmers, and, there was always work to be done. And if you wanted something, you had to earn it. And I always tried to instill that in my kids too.
So Christina, that independence you joke about Angie having from the womb, I know just from our previous conversations, that was something that really stayed with Angie, even to the point where she had decided that she was going to drop out of school and kind of do her own thing, and you gave her that motherly push. And Mona had actually talked to us when we spoke to her previously about that. But that independence definitely led her to make her own decisions, and you had to give her that mom push, right?
Yeah. She always wanted to do things her way. She didn't care much for rules that were laid down for her. And she definitely always tried to push boundaries and stuff like that, but most kids do. A lot of kids are like that.
Sure.
Well, speaking of boundary pushing, I'm the oldest of 3, and Angie is the oldest of 4, correct?
Yes,
and
4 girls.
And there's quite a bit of an age difference between the 3. Would you mind naming off the ages of her sisters?
Oh, sure. Zarima just turned 8 years old. Jessica, she is 16. She'll be 17 next month. And Wendy is 20. And then Angie would have been 26.
So she was definitely the leader of the pack.
Oh, yeah.
And with the attitude to back it up and independence, and she ruled the roost. So going back to how you'd mentioned sports and how she has she always kind of just been one of those that grabs the attention? I mean, she does well at everything. So anything that she puts her mind out to do, she succeeds at. I remember listening to past interviews and just, with talking to you before, I mean, this girl was not just good at basketball, but set records. Not just good at softball and being a catcher, but had schools all over the state trying to pick her up on her team. She actually went to state for bowling and ended up having some type of a recognition in that as well. So, I mean, she all around is one of those people that is a fast learner. And if she starts something, she does well at it.
Yeah, she was definitely a natural athlete. She was school hoop shoot champion. The kid hit 44 free throws in 2 minutes. I mean, that's not bad.
No, it's not bad at all.
That's pretty phenomenal.
She did the shot put. She was little, but she had a heck of an arm on her. And the shot put, she broke her own school record 5 times.
Wow.
And her final one was 46 foot 6.5 inches.
Wow.
And
that's crazy.
That's pretty good for a
for as
shot put.
petite as she was, though.
Right.
I mean, she was like 5 foot. I mean, goodness.
Yeah, and she wasn't any taller than that all through middle school either. I think she hit that height in about the 4th grade, and she didn't grow since. And
I can relate to
but
that.
I remember looking at her like in 4th grade, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's like the tallest kid. I'm like, she's going to be great at like basketball and volleyball and stuff like that. And joke was on me because she didn't grow since. And she was amazing at volleyball, but she couldn't play the front row, and that would make her so mad because she was too short. She didn't have the arm span, and she just couldn't jump near high enough to do anything. And she'd get mad because they'd pull her out and put her back in whenever it was her time to serve. But
so kind of leading into whatever Angie took on, she was very independent. She did well at whatever she decided to do. That kind of leads us up into, she gets her GED. She ends up moving to Indy. And, you later find out that she has entered into the world of dancing. And she rather enjoyed it. I mean, it's something that she was good at. She entered pool competitions. She had dreams of maybe doing her own studio kind of thing before. But so that kind of led into that, if she was going to if she was going to set herself up to do something, she was going to succeed at that. And I mean, as far as being independent and succeeding within taking care of herself, and, there's been a lot of talk with her profession. But like you said, Angie was the type that, in the beginning, she may have gotten burned out at the end, but she enjoyed what she did. She wasn't one of those that had to go, to the bar and drink or, be involved in the drug world to do what she did. She just rather enjoyed that profession, correct?
Yeah, she liked entertaining. And, granted, of course, me and her dad, we hated it.
Sure.
I'm not going to say that we liked it because we really didn't. I mean, no parent would.
Right.
Sure.
But we accepted it because, she was an adult. What was we going to do? And I know a lot of people just kind of, well, if that was my kid, I would, well, you can say that all you want. But the fact is she's an adult. She lives on her own.
Right.
Absolutely. And she was pretty honest with you. I mean, about what she was doing. She was safe about it. She was making you aware.
At first, she wasn't. She would like, oh, I'm working here, I'm working there, and we just kind of almost figured it out on our own. But I mean, she didn't really hide it once we figured it out. But she was pretty honest about it, after that. But like I said, it really didn't take us long.
Well, and I'm sure it's one of those things that you honestly, you want to know your daughter's safe, but you're not wanting to really hear the details of this job anyway, and she's probably not wanting to provide them to you, so especially Dad.
You'd be surprised. She would have video, and she would come over, and she'd be like, Mom, I'm really good at this. Look. And I'm like, no, I don't want to see that.
Oh, my goodness.
Like, no, seriously, just look at this. And, I mean, as much as I hate to say it, I mean, she was really good. It was stuff that she would like do for pole competitions and stuff like that. But, you still don't want to see it.
Right.
But,
sure.
she was, look, Mom, look, no.
Well, that totally piggybacks, actually. I mean, it's not really a stretch. And I think it's important to remind listeners that, anytime women are up there performing and doing that dancing, that takes an incredible amount of strength. That is not something that you just come by easily. You have to be very fit to do something like that. There are women that go to classes and do that as exercising. So really for Angie being so athletic, all through high school, it's no wonder that she excelled and did well at it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
So taking us back, so we spoke with Mona on the first episode, and she told us her side of the story as far as, where they began with their friendship from the days of disliking each other the first day they met each other in high school to sitting down and coming to terms with, hey, I think I kind of like you. I think I kind of like you too. And then they were inseparable since then. So having this story, unfortunately, where the story goes, if you wouldn't mind picking up from the day where Mona's calling you and kind of explaining to us where everything began with you, with this whole story with your daughter and where the journey's taken you. If you could kind of start right there and just tell us, your thoughts and where this took you throughout this whole journey.
Okay. When she first called me, I remember the conversation. She was just like, the first thing out of her mouth was, "Don't freak out, Moms, but I think we have a problem." And of course I'm going to freak out when I hear something like that. But, and then she told me, she was like, "Sis didn't come home last night." And, and at first I'm just like, oh, well, trying to justify anything that I could think of. And, it was, well, maybe she had too much to drink and her phone died, or, but then, you're also thinking, well, Angie's smart enough to charge her phone. And, and just everything starts going through your head. And she had sent me a screenshot of the text message that Angie had sent, the in case I go missing one, and had also sent me Raven's phone number along with it. And I actually called Raven after I kept trying to get a hold of Angie. I couldn't get a hold of her. Her phone kept going straight to voicemail. And that's when I called Raven's number. And I got voicemail. I didn't say anything. I just hung up. And a little while later, she did call me back. And when she called me back, she said, did somebody there call this number? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, this is Nicole. And I was like, well, I'm looking for Raven. She was like, well, yeah, it's Raven, but I go by Nicole. And I said, okay. And I said, I'm looking for Angie. And she was like, well, I don't know Angie. And I'm like, okay, well, how about Diamond? She's like, oh, yeah, I know Diamond. And, and then she told me, well, she was here last night, but she got a call from a guy and left at 3:00 in the morning. And, at that point, it's, okay, And so I hung up from her. And I'm still trying to get a hold of Angie. I'm calling. And I start calling tow yards. Maybe her car got towed. I'm calling the hospitals. Maybe she's in the hospital. And, nothing from anywhere. I called jails to see maybe she got arrested. Nothing. And then the worst one, because I just did not want to do it, but I did. I called the morgue, which, I mean, that one alone, that was a hard phone call to make, just for the simple fact that, that could even enter your mind that something like that could have happened to your child.
Absolutely.
And, they didn't have anything. And so we drove down to Indianapolis, went and filed a missing, because I had called and asked, I said, I know it's got to be 24 hours till you file a missing persons report, but how do you go about that? And then they had told me, they said, well, that's actually kind of a myth. They say you can file a missing persons report at any time. And so we went down and filed a missing persons report.
And so at that time, when you filed that missing persons report, this is still very fresh. This is literally within the first 36 hours?
Yeah.
So this is the first 36 hours. So at this point, you're still thinking, positive, something's going to come up, you're not really for sure what you're really dealing with at this moment.
Yeah.
But then you still kind of jump into, this is when I kind of noticed that information went out about her being missing, is that your family had prepared flyers. A lot of social media information was going around at this time. And then you had a detective that was on a vacation for the first few days. Is that correct?
Yeah. He had called, and after we filed the missing persons report, and then they assigned it to him and everything, he had called and, gathered a little bit of information, and then we never heard anything. And I would call the number that we had for him, which, just rang through to his desktop, and, left messages, and we still never heard anything. So about 4 days later, and, in the meantime, we're still going down to Indianapolis and, going to her apartment and looking around, and, we went to the address where she was last at. And
by that time, what had you noticed or found out about that address, even in those first 72 hours?
We wasn't exactly sure which apartment it was. We just knew which set it was. So, we snuck in,
Oh.
I don't blame you one bit. I would have
Yeah,
been
me
hopping
neither.
that fence. I would have been waiting for that gate to open.
Because,
There's that
Yeah,
mama
me
bear
neither.
coming out.
we tried to use the thing for a gate code, but it didn't work for us. So we just waited for a car and then just kind of snuck in behind them. And, and we was out there looking around and, just trying to find anything, then we had called, and the apartment complex had told us that they had surveillance cameras and that we could actually look at them if we got there by a certain time. And so we went there and snuck in again. And then, they were telling us whenever we got there, oh, well, you need permission from the police to look at this. And, and which that wasn't how it was when we spoke to them on the phone. But, we're like, okay, whatever. So we went and found the police station, which finding the missing persons station was not easy. I mean, you don't imagine it even is where it is.
I remember you telling me you had to go like 3 or 4 different buildings before you
Yeah.
actually got to the proper place you needed to be.
Right. I mean, it was like a wild goose chase just trying to find it. And then when we got there, it's not like a building that you go into. You have to be buzzed in from the outside. And so we were out there and we hit the buzzer and everything. And finally, somebody comes down and talks to us. And, and we tell them, we're like, hey, we've got, we can do this, but we haven't heard from the detective. We're trying to get a hold of him. And so they take us upstairs, and another detective walks in, and she goes and looks around, and Angie's case file had just been sitting on his desk while he had been on vacation for 4 days.
Wow.
So, I mean, nobody was looking for Angie but her friends and family.
Wow.
At that point.
Which is, I'm sure, just your heart drops to your stomach to think this is the
really,
biggest crucial moment in your life. You have a child missing, and, just as you've heard with any crime, I mean, those first 48 to 72 hours are extremely crucial, and you're finding out that nothing's been done at this point. So once that detective realizes that and you tell her that she can get surveillance, does she jump right on it at that point?
Actually, she did.
Awesome.
She did. And she went over, about that point was, when we kind of parted ways with her. And she kind of took it on from there. And then when the original detective got back, she handed everything back over to him.
So when you took a look at that footage, or when they took a look at that footage, what did they see on that?
Well, the first time we had seen the footage was actually on TV.
Wow.
Right
It
along
was-
with everybody
What?
else.
Yeah. And it was, oh no, your heart just sank when you seen that. It was just like, what was going on? Was she in her car? Was she not in her car? We really just didn't have too much to go on at that point, other than they seen Angie's car leave and Raven's car immediately follows behind her. But just watching it, you just got an eerie feeling.
So as a parent, you had to be absolutely livid, because I know as a parent, if that's the first time I'm seeing footage like that and the police have not brought that to me and this is my child, I am livid and I want answers. How did that work out for you? Did you call them and ask them, or?
No, they had actually told us that her car had followed behind it. But just seeing it was a lot different than just like being told.
And made it all that more real for you to picture
really
that moment, and that's.
It really did. And, there was a lot of things that was, getting backwards on the media, especially after Angie's car was found, which the car had been found and nobody knew it. We actually had possession of her car for about a week before anybody actually knew that her car.
Super glad you just brought that up, because you're right. There's been kind of a misconception on that. So if you could go back, so we've got this all happening on October 26th. The last, known sighting of Angie's vehicle is technically October 27th because it's 3:29 a.m. But there was actually a tow company that had picked up her car, and it wasn't until they looked into that car that they realized that it was involved in a missing persons investigation. Is that correct?
No.
Okay, that's another misconception that's out there. So I'm going to have you start because I just feel like that's where a lot of people are thinking they're sitting on this information. So I wanted to throw that out there so you can squash it. So if you could just start right back from we had her car longer and explain that to everyone.
Well, it's how her car was actually found was Angie's car was financed through a buy here, pay here place. And which I just kind of looking into things on my own, I was like, well, I wonder if her car had OnStar. So, I called the place where she got her car from, and I'm calling OnStar, just trying to figure out if there's a way to find out where this car is. And then come to find out there was a tracking device in her car. Wow. So we had, then we got a hold of the missing persons detective, and, we let him know, hey, her car was financed through this place. And, can you maybe get a warrant for the tracking device that's on her car?
So this is all information you had to come up with yourself?
Yeah.
Wow. So it was actually the finance company that had, just to clarify, that had the tracking device in the vehicle, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so that led to where her car was at that time?
Right.
Okay. And then if you can kind of go from there, there's been different things said, but from what we know, Angie's vehicle left the apartment complex off of Harcourt Road with Raven's car following right behind it. Angie is not known to have been in either one of those vehicles, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so if you can kind of further on from there, what we do know, what we don't know, and pick back up from there, just to kind of squash out any rumors. So her car left, so that kind of leaves from deduction of if she wasn't in that car, she wasn't in Raven's car, that would leave her back at the apartment, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so then there was another vehicle that transported her.
Yeah, there was. I know with her car, there was a lot of misconceptions that, she was in the trunk of her car. No, she was not. There was blood in the back seat of her car. No, there was not. It was actually barbecue sauce.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, whenever we actually ran into a reporter that was telling us, hey, they found, your daughter may have been in the trunk of her car and they found blood in the back seat of her car, and we hadn't heard any of that. And, of course, your heart just drops and, everything just goes racing through your mind. And it's like, oh my God, she was in the trunk of her car. They found blood. And we get a hold of the detective, and he was like, no, that's not the case. They had gotten a tip that she may have been in the trunk of her car. And so that was actually in the warrant to search her car. And that was what the reporter had saw.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense on how that got kind of aired around as misinterpreted information and didn't really quite clear up anything for anyone. So at this point, you have talked to the detective. They're starting to work on the case. And I mean, I live, east of Indianapolis, and I've personally on the east side saw flyers that your family had created in the early on beginning times. So at this point, she's a missing person. She's considered more an endangered missing person, correct?
Yes.
And so then you and your family had actually put together all these flyers, and you've actually had some donations put together to put up an actual billboard.
Yes.
And did any tips or information that were credible come in during that time for you?
I think a few of them may have, but not too much that the detectives had turned over to us.
Right.
They would give us a little bit of things here and there, which, and we understood, we didn't want to do anything to compromise their investigation, and if they gave us something and told us, you cannot say anything, we didn't say anything. So there was a few things that they had received, but I don't believe that it was anything too major.
Okay. I kind of want to go back on that. So during that time, there had been, different information that came in. There were the thoughts of, she's missing, she's endangered. You had actually received, we were talking the other day, and you were kind of explaining a little bit further, but you had actually received ransom notes over your daughter. You had received tips that she was with so-and-so at such a dress. I mean, you received a lot of information from the public that wasn't credible. And just tell the listeners what your family kind of went through during that time. Here you have no information about your daughter. It's a parent's ultimate, nightmare to not know where your child is. But explain to people what you had to deal through with, it's the hardest time of your life. What were you receiving from people during this time?
Oh my God, people are just terrible. They really are.
Oh yes, they are. Yeah.
We would have people call, hey, we seen your daughter at this place, or we seen your daughter at that place. And of course, the first thing we always did was we turned everything over to investigators. But that didn't stop us from going out and looking ourselves either.
Sure.
We went into more than one abandoned house on our own. We had people call that wanted me to meet them by myself, which I never did any of that. The thought did cross my mind, but my husband wasn't about to let me do anything that stupid.
Right.
But at that time, you're so vulnerable that you almost, you know what I mean? You just want to find your child. And if somebody's telling you that there might be a hope that she's at the other end of this call, I mean, it makes you want to do things that maybe in a proper mindset you wouldn't do. But in that moment, you're just grasping at all forms of hope.
Yeah. And, and we had some really awful phone calls. People would call and say things that they had did to our child, and
oh my God.
And it wasn't good things either. I think even had one person call and say that they had chopped her up in a blender.
Oh my
What?
gosh. Wow.
Someone else referred to her as a dog because he said that he had her on the end of his leash. And then the ransom demands that started coming in, which those were, even at that point where you're so desperate, even I could realize that the ransom demand was a joke.
Right.
It was one of my absolute favorite pictures ever, and they had photoshopped it, and then they were trying to tell me that it wasn't photoshopped and I was stupid and they were smart, and told me how miserable she was and she's being held in captivity, and my exact words were, "Bitch, why is she smiling?"
Right.
Good for
right.
you.
Yeah.
We talked about
I like
this a
that.
few times, and I mean, and that's just the things people
pardon
are willing
the
to
language,
do.
but that was just the first thing that came out of my mouth.
Well, of course.
And because I'm sitting there looking at the picture, and
And you know exactly what picture it is.
yeah, and so I knew they were lying from the get-go, but I don't know if it was just intuition or what, but I mean, that was just all that I could think of at that point. And I was just like,
Sure.
and and of course we we turned everything over to IMPD, and anytime anything happened, we were on the phone with them, or sending emails, and we sent a lot of emails.
Well, of course. So I have to ask, Stephen is with us, Angie's dad. So, Stephen, when these things are happening, when your wife's getting these calls about your child, when people are calling and saying these things, clearly that's going to bring out, obviously, that protector that every dad is to their little girl, and then obviously that every husband is to their wife. Tell our listeners what that was like for you as a dad and as a husband, knowing that now not only you're missing your daughter and these things are being said, but now your wife is having this sort of abusive behavior aimed towards her while you're looking for your daughter.
Well, it was more of an empty feeling because I felt like I couldn't help or do anything to help her, and I'd just give her a hug and let her know everything was going to be all right, and just to ignore the comments that everybody. But at the end of the day, it was hurting me too.
Of course.
Because I'd go to bed crying every night, because I didn't know where she was, and then of course, people calling my wife, doing all this bad stuff and saying this bad stuff, and I would get phone calls. I would be working. Christina's like, you can't believe what these people just said to me, crying her eyes out. And I would leave work and come home, and then we would try to figure it out. And then, of course, you know, we was getting hundreds of tips a day. So we was going to Indianapolis 5-6 times a week, sometimes 7 times a week, looking up on these tips. You know, we even went to like bodies of water to see if there was tire tracks, and it was a very, very emotional.
It sounds exhausting.
8 long months.
I was just going to say, it probably felt like, you know, what would be 8 months for your average person, to you, this was just an eternity of hell. I mean, during these 8 months. And I know you had so many people victimize you, and you're in this vulnerable time, but you did have, you know, people that were very close to you and very supportive that helped you get through this. And Mona is on the line, so I want to remind everybody she is on the line with us. And so Mona, you know, as a second daughter to Stephen and Christina, you know, I know you were there for them through this whole time, and you're, you know, feet out on the ground helping hang flyers and just really there to support them while you're going through this as well, of missing, you know, your sister, your best friend. Can you kind of touch upon that time for them, and, you know, how that was for you watching them go through all of this?
I mean, it kind of messed me up. Like, I wasn't right for almost like 2 years now. Like, I'm just now getting my mind back right. Like, I was scared to go anywhere. I couldn't trust none of my friends, so I had to stop talking to everyone. I was still here living in the city by myself, so I was very scared, honestly. I mean, I still am to this day, because I just don't understand why these people, you know, are still out here. Like, I have to watch my back every day.
And I totally
and I just
understand.
don't understand why. Like, what was the whole reason why?
And there's so many questions to that.
Yeah, it really, I mean, losing your best friend is one of, like, the worst things. It's like losing a sister or a mom. Like, it was hard. It's still hard. It's still hard this day.
100%. And like you just said, you know, you were saying, you know, during this time it created trust issues for you. And I know Angie had many, many friends. And I know there's been some of those friends who have been there through thick and thin, and, you know, they're very supportive and very helpful. If you both could kind of tell us, between, you know, Christina and Stephen, and you as well, Mona, you know, I know your friend group, you know, you talked to us about it on the last episode, Mona, has kind of changed. You've really isolated yourself. You're sticking more to family. You second guess everybody. How do you feel like during that time, I mean, with, you know, Angie having so many different friends and so many people that were involved, do you feel like you constantly had to look over your shoulder to these people as well?
Oh, yeah. I mean, even, like, the best friends that we hung out with, like, every day from sun up to sundown, I even have to, you know, I have to watch certain ways, like, they react or how they talk or environments or, like, things they're bringing around. Like, I just couldn't be in this position, because you never know. Like, I may be next. Like, I don't understand why. So I'm like, I have to question everybody. Like, it's not only just friends, it's family as well.
Right. And what would you say on that, Christina? I mean, to kind of further upon.
Yeah. We didn't trust anyone other than, I mean, of course, Mona. That's hard for me to say. And another friend, Lindsay. Those were really about the only two, and we constantly kept in contact with the both of them, and we always let them know what was going on as well. You know, we viewed them just the same as we do the rest of our children, and we wanted them to be included in as much as, you know, we would tell the other girls. And because out of everybody, even though we didn't trust anybody, those were, you know, definitely the two that we knew without a doubt, hands down, that we did trust.
Absolutely. And that can mean all and everything in a moment like this, when you've got that much vulnerability. You know, you've got your daughter who is living in a whole nother city, surrounded by many, many different people. And, you know, sometimes friend or foe. I mean, sometimes your enemies want to stay real close. So, I mean, just because you have people checking up on you, wanting to be a part of helping you, sharing stories
doesn't mean that their intentions are pure.
And so you have to think of that. So, so now we're going to kind of lead into June 20th. So it's our understanding, and through various sources where this has been sourced out, is that there was a tip that was called in from, and I want to kind of go back before I announce this. So actually, we were just talking about how you didn't get to see footage until it was released to the news. You actually had no idea that your daughter was the one that was being investigated when this yard was being dug up based on a tip that came in until the news media released that, is how you had to find that out, correct?
Right.
And the tip was supposedly it was called in from, I know there's many sources. There's, Crime Watch Daily's been talked about. We've had ID Discovery. There's plenty of news sources, but it has been made out there public. And I just wanted to confirm that with you, that there was a self-proclaimed junkie who said that he himself didn't do it, but he knows that Barron had paid a numerous group of junkies to actually place Angie where her body was found. Is that what you know to be true as well?
We did hear that. We were also informed that it was a Crime Stoppers tip that had came in that originally led them there.
Okay.
And I'm not too sure where the others came in at. But we were told about them.
Well, you know what? I was looking at some pictures the other night, and I saw that there was a picture of the hole that they removed Angie from. That took some work. That was the work of 2 or 3 people.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because, when I first heard about it, I thought it was just like a little small dig, throw some dirt, But when I looked, this was like 4 feet.
It was like 5 feet deep.
Yeah, 5 foot deep. Yeah, that's just no 1, 2 people didn't do that.
Yeah.
Well, no, and that also led to the investigators have, I know not everything is on this podcast, but we've talked to Detective Torres. I've talked to him. You've talked to him. And his, idea on that is that this was a premeditated crime based off of the gravesite that was prepared.
Yeah. Because it would have taken quite some time for somebody with a shovel to dig up.
Oh, absolutely.
In a wooded area.
Yes.
Yeah, the house was actually the last house on the street. If we can kind of
Yeah.
set that up for the listeners who haven't maybe heard about Angie's case until the podcast, we want to describe this. If you're coming down, and this neighborhood isn't the best in the neighborhood. It tends to have a lot of families that have been there for a long time. It's a higher crime area. But this house was, if you're going down a street, it's going to be the very last house at the end of this street with woods all along the side. And the backyard is quite covered because of what's growing along the fence line. So, it was pretty, it was meant, like you have been quoted to say, it was meant for no one to find Angie.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if it weren't for this tip, God bless who, whatever their participation is, I thoroughly thank them for coming forward, because if it wasn't for that tip, we might not know where Angie is today.
Yeah. We never would have found her if it wasn't. Where she was found, you're not going to think to look back there. Yeah, nobody would have found her. She was meant to never be found. We were never supposed to find our child. We were supposed to go the rest of our lives not knowing where our child was or what happened to her behind it.
Okay, well, let me ask you, do you know or heard of any connection to that neighborhood where she was buried?
Yes. We were told that Barron is from that neighborhood. He grew up like a block or 2 away from there.
Okay.
We were also told at one point that he even lived in that house.
That his family had rented that home.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So to further on that, and I hate to bring this up, Christina, we've talked about it before, but you're not aware that, your daughter has been found. You actually find it out from the news reports. So now you've got every news crew at this house. You've got forensics there. The crime scene investigators are there. You find out this genuinely through the news. Once everything is said and done there, it wasn't actually public information. And there was another podcast that was done that released the cause of death and said that Angie was shot to death. I, during an interview with Detective Torres about 2 weeks ago, my reason for bringing it up with him was to say, is there potentially a murder weapon out there that could be tied back to this crime? Because, we're waiting on people to come forward, and whether or not they do or don't, I wanted to ask him, is there potentially a weapon, and maybe it's exchanged hands since then, but, if the last crime committed and the, forensics and everything else can be tied back to this weapon. And he looked at me and goes, well, yes, potentially, yes, there is a weapon out there somewhere. We don't have it. And, the problem is that it's been 8 months. But to me, I mean, if typically once there's, if you talk to people who live more of a street life, and I've interviewed many people for these interviews and for this case, once there's quote unquote a body on a gun, it's typically destroyed. It's not usually sold, especially not to somebody that you would know. So there's still a very strong possibility out there that this weapon could pop up, whether it's either used in another crime or if it's just hidden or if it's been disposed of, that could lead back to, the suspects. Do you have anything you want to further on that? I know you didn't really get a chance to release that information yourself, and it was kind of just put out there, unbeknownst to you, to it being released. And I just wanted to give you a moment to kind of be a voice on that and speak on that yourself.
Yeah. I know there's, we're actually not permitted to say too much about it, which we had always kept her cause of death quiet, because her death certificate was supposed to have been sealed. And so that was actually information that wasn't supposed to be out there to begin with. But since it is, we're not really sure what has happened to the murder weapon. And like Detective Torres did say, after 8 months, it's hard telling.
Right.
It could be anywhere by now. It could be wherever her purse is, or her car keys, her cell phone. Those things were never found.
And to further on that, so you've got your daughter, the last known address that she's at is with Raven and Barron. She did not make a mention of leaving, going anywhere else, which would be very untypical to her behavior before then. I've talked to many people, and they said if she was going to go do a private party and to leave, first thing she would have done would more than likely have called Mona. If she wasn't available, she would have called, there's two other girls that were mentioned, just to be like, hey, this is how it went. This is how much money I made. It went well, it went bad. To either kind of rant and rave that it was a good choice, or to be like, damn, I really wish I wouldn't have done this. It wasn't worth anything. But the fact that nobody heard from her, was strange. And then you've got Raven herself admits to your daughter being there, but her excuse is that there were 2 phone calls made to kind of have her meet up with somebody from the club. For the listeners, we've talked about this before, but can you confirm that she did not have any phone calls? There was no phone activity that led anyone to believe that she left due to phone calls, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so now you've got the last, known people are Raven and Barron. Then you've got your daughter popping up off of East 43rd Street in a neighborhood that Barron is known to have lived in at one time, but certainly he has family members that address is not too far away from that address. And so where does that leave, your mind? Where are the theories? I know you have many people that have came forward and talked to you, but theories were kind of flying around in the beginning, of sex trafficking, of Angie being sex trafficked, being involved with certain individuals. And then you actually find, out that her body's been recovered. What do you hear from that point on pertaining to theories and ideas?
We heard a lot of different ones. We were actually told by people who probably not so much involved, but had a hand in it, that Angie was killed because her and Barron had a relationship at one point, when Barron and Raven were broken up for a brief period of time. And we were also told that Raven did not like that, and that is what got Angie killed. That it was a, if you love me, this is what we're going to do type thing. And this, was information that we were getting from several people.
So to kind of a question I would have on that, we've heard that as well. But in addition, me and Mona talked, and on the last episode, Mona had kind of pointed out that this couple was behind on their rent and behind on car payments, correct?
Yeah.
And then those were paid up right after Angie's disappearance.
Because we had several people send us, even in the beginning, we had several people send us foreclosure notices for her, and eviction notices I mean, we had a lot of people send us that. And of course, we turn everything over to detectives. And just miraculously, a few days later, there was no more eviction notice. The cars were all paid up. And, and when Raven called me in January, she was, very quick to tell me that she wasn't being evicted from her apartment, and, and all her cars that she owned, and, and it just, none of it made any sense to me.
Well, Christina, now let me ask you this.
Yes.
How do we know that the car notes and the rent was paid up?
There is a way people can find that out. People can find anything out. We were being sent things.
Okay. Because what I found what was odd was they say that they were behind on rent.
Yes.
And yet they paid it up, but then they left the apartment anyway.
Yes.
That I didn't understand that.
Well, and and just in talking to a few different people through our investigation when we were discussing that with Detective Torres is, if you pay up, if you lose access to an apartment, then it's now at the possession of the apartment complex. They kind of control that. But that rent was paid up and they fled. So it was paid up.
But why would you? Well, my thing is, why would you pay up?
It's that much harder to get a warrant. It's that much harder to get somebody to gain access on a missing persons case.
Because if I'm behind, I'm just saying, if I'm behind,
sure,
and they're going to evict me, I'm not going to pay it up.
Well, no, but if you're behind and you receive money to perform a murder, and you're able to pay up that rent to keep people out of that apartment, that buys you time to clear your stuff out of it and clean the apartment up, you're going to pay that rent up. If you just made a large sum of money for doing something, you're going to protect that at all costs. You're going to pay all that up.
Makes
so
sense.
That's kind of my background on it. Now, me and Mona talked, on the last episode, and she kind of mentioned that. So you had received a lot of information, from inside people saying, so I can only assume that these are people that actually knew Angie. Friends of hers that said she had this relationship with Barron. Once you found out that there was rent that was behind, car notes that were behind, and those were paid up, did that change your idea on the motive of this murder?
Kind of a little bit. There was a lot of things that we were kind of wondering because we knew a lot of things just didn't make sense. Even though, the one thing that we constantly being told was about a relationship between Angie and Barron. Now, if that's, what it was that made it so easy for, whatever to happen, for whoever to do what they did to her, if maybe just some monetary value behind it sweetened the pot for them, or that, we have no idea. But we did, we found it awful funny that, just a couple of days after our daughter goes missing, their finances are caught up.
Right.
Sure. Well, and my thought process goes to just piggybacking off kind of what Lauren and Ed have said. Anytime that you're behind on rent or you're owing somebody money, if that's not paid up, what are they going to do? They're going to prosecute you, right? So they have to have a forwarding address, or they have to find you to prosecute you, right? Yeah. So there's traceability. There's ability to find you. And so that sort of leads into the question of, I know that it has been touched on by Lauren in the previous podcast. So this couple was talked to, and then what happened after they were talked to?
Well, actually, before they were talked to, they, quote unquote, went missing themselves, which was kind of weird.
Right. Raven walked away from her job, right?
Yeah. We were actually, people was getting a hold of us, and, they're like, I know your daughter's missing, but, Raven's missing too. Nobody can find her. And, we got several phone calls about the fact that she was missing as well. Which when she contacted me in January, she was trying to tell me she was in the hospital and all this other stuff, which she wasn't. We knew where they were. because after Angie went missing and everything had hit the news, they had cleared out their apartment completely and taken off for a while. They left town. They disappeared for a little bit.
So you had spoken. You said she had contacted you. Raven had contacted you and spoken to you.
Yeah.
So Angie had talked about this, or I apologize, not Angie. So Lauren had talked about this. You guys had actually called Angie's phone, and we talked to Mona about this also when you were looking for Angie initially. And who answered her phone?
That I don't know.
Okay. All right. We just wanted to clarify that. And then tell us about the comment that was made to you about wanting to know your daughter's last words. Can you kind of expound on that and tell people, listeners, how that comment was made to you and who made that comment?
When Raven called me the January after Angie was missing, so Angie would have been missing just a couple of months at this point, she had called me and, basically started the conversation out, letting me know what a great person she is and, how wonderful she is, and her bills are all paid and no eviction notices, and how many cars she owns, and I don't know what the point of any of it whatsoever was.
Right.
And at one point I had asked her, I said, well, what did you and Angie talk about? And just the words that were just burned into my brain was, oh, you want to know what your daughter's last words were? And that is, and the way she said it, and just the fact that she said that, it was just like immediately you knew without a doubt that she knew something.
She just came out of nowhere and just said that? I mean, just blurted out in the middle of the conversation, just said that?
Yes.
Wow.
When I asked her what her and Angie talked about, it was, oh, you want to know what her last words were.
Oh my God.
And what was your feelings? I mean, did that not just immediately create, I mean, I know before we've talked and you were very kind about it. You had to try to keep her on the phone. But I mean, that would cut through me. I would be ready to jump through that phone. Mm-hmm. My stomach would be in knots and my heart would be about to fly out of my chest.
There was a lot of things going through my head at that point in time. And I can honestly say not a one of them was very good.
Understandable.
When say, you would want to jump through the phone. I mean, it's almost like you have to physically stop yourself from doing that.
Sure.
It just, those words just cut straight through me.
And you've never forgotten them?
No, I haven't. I have not. And I took notes the entire time I to her. And she was telling me how, IMPD was just out to get them, and, they were going to stop at nothing to try to, basically tell me that IMPD was going to try to set them up and all this other stuff.
Sure.
And,
wow.
And I'm taking notes over the whole thing. And as soon as I get off the phone with her, I get a hold of Detective Burton, who is the missing persons detective, and I just, I gave him everything.
Absolutely.
So if you're going back to, we're right at that point where you don't really know what to think. You've got things coming flying in different directions. If you could, assess everything. I mean, at the end of the day, we can't really argue that Baron and Raven have some further knowledge. There's a reason that they fled. There's a reason that information they have been cooperative with the police has been false. If you could talk to Raven and Baron, what would you say to them?
Why? Why? That's just the one thing is why.
Sure.
I mean,
you took, my daughter's gone, and you want to play games. That's what it feels like, and at that point, Angie was just missing. And here I have her calling me, playing games with me. That's frustrating. If I would just love for them to sit back and think, what if this was my daughter? What if that was my daughter?
Right.
What would I do? What would I do if that was my daughter?
Absolutely. Stephen, and just to kind of get your intake on that, when Christina told you that those words had been said, how, all you want to know what your daughter said, how did that make you feel? And the same question to you, if you could tell these two anything, what would you say?
Yeah, I would want to know why. I mean, if it was over jealousy, why was she mad at Angie? Why wasn't she mad at the guy who cheated on her? Or I don't know. I hopefully I do get to talk to him, and hopefully it's in court, and hopefully I get to watch him cry.
And Mona, I know we had kind of talked about this before, but with all of this coming to light in this session of our podcast, if you had the opportunity now, given that listeners have heard all of this, what would you say?
I mean, I asked the same thing as why, but I honestly don't think this is about jealousy. I think this is some more deep than jealousy, because I just don't see someone living as far as it has gotten over she mad about a guy, which a guy had more than just one female. Like, he had more than just Raven. So it wasn't just Angie was the big problem. Like, if she was going to be mad at somebody, she should have been mad at the 15 other girls he had. So I don't really believe this is over jealousy. I can't. But yeah, I really
agree.
just want to know why.
I agree with you, Mona. I agree.
And you and I have discussed things, Mona. I mean, my opinion doesn't solve this case. It doesn't bring a conviction. All I can do is talk to people and hopefully bring awareness, and hopefully somebody does hear this and it puts them in their feelings and they think about it, and that this is their best friend, this is their daughter. But I would fully agree with you. I mean, I just, based on what we know and what we figured out, I just can't see this simply being over jealousy. Now, would that be the perfect person to implicate in something because there's already a hatred and an anger there? Sure.
Yeah,
and like you said,
see
Christina, then that'd be kind of the icing on the cake to have the monetary gain. Kill two birds with one stone, so to speak, is the saying. Is kind of how I would relate that to being. But yeah, I'm with you, Mona, and I'm not doubting. I think you're both right. I think that both portions, along with Angie maybe knowing way more information than she should have known, unbeknownst to her at the time, is why we're in this situation.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, unfortunately, we have run out of time, and Christina, you and your husband, I know you guys work third shift, and we will have you back here on part 3.
Yes.
We still have a lot to discuss, and also you have your daughters with you as well.
Yeah.
So, Mona, I appreciate you once again for taking out the time to come on here to tell your sister's story. Christina, you and your husband, I appreciate both of you taking out the time. Both of you are third shifters. From what I was told, that's a tough shift to work. So my hat's off to both of you. But Mona, if there's anything that come to mind, you can feel free to call Lauren or myself or the victim's advocate, Jasmine, and at any time. So absolutely. Both of them girls are night owls. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. So
Mona already knows. We've had some late night conversations, and I'll be on the phone with Mona, and I'm like, okay, I'll call you. It'll take just 1 second. And an hour later, we're chopping things back up. And so, yes, we have been there and been through it. So, and this won't be the end of it. This is just the end of part 2.
Yes, she is completely right about that. So we'll get everything worked out. And like I said, we'll all continue to work. And Christina, I made clear to Mona that just because we did the podcast doesn't mean we're done with this.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure you understood that.
Yeah, we appreciate that too.
Okay.
You're more than welcome. Absolutely more than welcome.
All right. Well, guys, we're going to get up out of here. Like we said, there will be a part 3. So we need everybody back here. So hopefully some tips will come in and somebody can be able to help us out with this. So, all right, guys, until next time, take care.
Thank you.
Oh,